kosher, so it is kosher. If it's something which is a piece of steak, what you would give to eat to someone and it stands by itself, so then it's not bottle, it doesn't become nullified because it's a piece that stands for itself and you'll give it to someone kosher. It's a nice piece of meat or chicken or something. Now, that's a royal iskal. Now, if you found it in a butcher store, now in a butcher store we have a problem. What's the problem? There is a din of kavua. But if you have most of the meat, let's say, I went and I had meat, most of it was kosher, and in the house some of it, something of non-kosher got mixed up, and it's all mixed together, so then it becomes bottle. But if you have 9 stores selling kosher, 1 store selling non-kosher, and I went into the store and bought something, and I don't know where I bought it, so that's called kavua. I went into the place, then it's a 50-50 chance, kemechza mechza, so then it's treif. Now, when you buy meat from a store, and suddenly in the store there was a mix-up, so if most is kosher, so in Sefer Hay it says that when you found out anything what you bought before it's kosher, anything what you buy afterwards you cannot have. Why? Because we're afraid that the person won't know the difference between chopped meat and steak. And the steak is not bottle because it's naida. You know in the store there is non-kosher. Now this is a machlekes in going back. What does this mean? What is this halacha?
If you turn off the mic, we can hear without it.
Thank you. Yeah. So now, the question over here is, what is this, where was the mistake made? Is it that I have 10 stores selling kosher, and I went into one store, and suddenly we realized that one store has treif, there's a treif for a lung, so then it's taruvis of the stores, and I don't know which store is what, or we're talking in the same store itself, and there's a mixture in that same store itself, and I don't know what's happening. That's called taruvis hamakulin, the taruvis of the stores, or it's taruvis hachatiches, a taruvis of the pieces. Do we understand that? Is it that those 10 stores selling kosher, and then I realized one store has treif, a treif, and I went into one store and bought, I don't know which store I bought, so it's a taruvis, I don't know what store is what, or we're talking the same one store, and there's a mixture of 2 types of meat. The Shach, Bach, Ramah learns that we're talking one store, and there's a shaila in that store. We don't know what meat I bought. But if it's going to be a case that I know that I mixed up in one store, and we don't know which store sells kosher or not, then it's kavua, and whatever I bought is treif. Now the case of the Mahini meats was taruvis hachatichos. One store, and we don't know what you bought. And we say the roiv was kosher, therefore, when you found out that there's tarfis, therefore, after 3 p.m., you couldn't buy anymore. That is the halacha, and that's what's the base of the halacha of Rabbi Belsky. It's an open din. Well, now let's go and start thinking about this din. Someone but knew that there was a mixture here. I didn't know. The owner knew. The workers knew. So what's 3 p.m. now? So on this, there's a shach in Yudalit and so forth, and there's a Pri Megadim and an Alter. The Pri Megadim brings a case. If someone sent a shliach to be mekadesh a woman, and the shliach was mekadesh a woman, the shliach dies. I don't know who he was mekadesh. So therefore, every woman who will come, it could be it's a sister, it could be a mother, So the halacha is, we learned it in Rambam, we should know it, that he's also b'chol hanashim. Anyone, because anyone who shows up could be what? Could be a relative. So Taisus says, but there's Raiv. Raiv. Most women in the world are not the relative. So let's say, Kol de Parish, Meruba Parish, anyone who comes out is from the majority, and the majority is Mutter. So Taisus says, Knasahu. Chazaka shliach ha'isa shluchusei, it's a knas, it's a issa d'rabbanan. The Ramban argues, and the Ramban says, it's a kavua. What means it's a kavua over here? The shliach knows who was Mekadosh. The woman knows that she was Mekadosh. The woman, everyone is different one than another. So therefore, there is idea of kavua over here. And since a kavua is called kavua kamach tzal machza, any woman is kavua kamach tzal machza. It's a 50-50 chance. Others say, so the Pri Megadim goes over here, if the owner or someone knows that there's a mixture of meat in the store, so then it will be the shaila before we found out. But someone knew, the owner knew, or someone knew that there was a mixture, so therefore this is the same halacha. That's a yadua b'kvuya. You know that there's a problem over here, even though that not everyone found out, but since there are those who found out, so therefore it's a kavua, and called kavua kamach tzal machza. That's called Yediyah B'Kvua. The Alter Rebbe in the Shaila Tzchuvas Yudches has a shaila of a veya of a lung, what was found that it's treif. And then it got mixed up. Now Alter Rebbe goes with the Rashba over here that the lung stands for itself. It's not a mixture. And the Alter Rebbe brings this machlekes between the Tosfos and the Ramban. But Alter Rebbe learns over here that it's not because there's only a Yediyah. Because she's chashuv, the woman is important, so she cannot become nisbatel, cannot become nullified. And since she's not nullified, so therefore it's kavor kamach tzal machza. There's no bittul over here. So the same thing that Alter Rebbe wants to say, that if you know that in the store there's a treifel lung, the lung stands for itself, it doesn't become bottle. And the Ramban, the Alter Rebbe says, since most of the Rishonim accept the Ramban, therefore in such a case of a mixture of yavish b'yavish, and the thing stands for itself, there's no taruvis, and it's usr. The Tzemach Tzedek argues with the Alter Rebbe, and he says that the woman is she is a distinct between one woman and another woman. So even though I don't know which woman, but there is, not because there's a Baal Chai, it's because there's a difference between one woman and another woman. Masha'enkin and meat, even though that you knew that there was something wrong, but if it got cut up and you cannot see the difference between one piece and another piece, and you're going to have to check every piece of meat, it's bottle. And as I learned, it's a Tzedek in Yerdeya, Siman Ayin, Ois Ches. So now the question over here is, how does a meat store work? And let's see if this heta works or doesn't work. In a meat store today, it's not like you used to go to a butcher, you used to cut up meat, you want a piece of meat, he weighs it, and then he wraps it up and he gives it to you. Every piece of meat is cut and put in a package for itself, and it's put on a shelf. That is the normal way how now meat is sold. So now the Drisha learns that he's arguing with he's with the Bach. He says, because in a house or in a store, all the meats are mixed together. So therefore, if you found some meat in a store, which a butcher shop, all the meats are mixed together, that's called taruvas. But if the taruvas is, I don't know which store I went into, every store is distinct one from the other. If so, if every package of meat standing on itself on a shelf, is that called taruvas or not? And there is a shach over there in Si Cotton Chof Ches. What he says, the lashon of the shach comes out that if every piece of meat is standing for itself, it's the same thing, like I have a problem, I don't know which store I went into. So according to this svara, the whole heta of roiv is not here, because every piece is standing on its own. It's no mixture. You want this and it's standing over there. That's number one. Number two, there was a yediyah. The owner knew what he brought in, and the goyim knew what they were cutting. So how could you come and say that they didn't find out only until 3 o'clock? It means they didn't find out until 3 o'clock. Someone in the store knew. And the Dark Yeshiva brings that if someone in a store knows, the owner knows that there was a mixture of meat and so forth, then you cannot come along and say that Nisava Chatichis B'Makulin, it's a mistake, and then it was Noida. The only way of the idea could be that it was known before and then it was forgotten. But the guy never forgot.
A goy's idea?
I'm talking the owner. Thank you.
Was not religious.
Oh, so here we go now, another shayla. Good. You brought up the shayla. Good.
The video's over there.
The shayla over here is a 2-point shayla. Even if I'll say a yediyah of a goy is not a yediyah, but if the goy mixed up and Medafka gave it to me, and this what he gave me, is that going to be considered that it's no yediyah? A yediyah means he knows about it, if he Medafka did it. Now you're going to come along and say that he was a mummer. The halacha is in Shulchan Aruch that a yid who doesn't keep Torah mitzvahs is a mummer. Anachi is like a goy. And only where you have a shaila is when he gives kedushin of kedushin. But for everything else, like Rabbi Shabbos, if you live in a yard with a yid who doesn't keep Shabbos or anything, you cannot be makna or anything. You have to buy the chutzah from him like a goy. The same thing if he shechts, it's tarfus. So you're going to say his yediyah is no yediyah. Well, unser Rosh Hashiva, Chike Halachis brings the Avnei Nezer. What Avnei Nezer says, I didn't see the Avnei Nezer because I couldn't find that it's l'chumra. We go both sides of the path, and that's how the Avnei Nezer wants to learn. That legabe kedushin, since he's l'poyel yid, so kedusha of kedushin. But legabe all the other things, so then we say that he's like a goy. If we'll take the Avnei Nezer shitta, so then the yediyah of the yid is a yediyah. And number two, in Hilchis Ribis, the Alter Rebbe learns that even for such a person, you're not allowed, it's a shayla of Ribis. So that we see the Alter Rebbe learns in certain halachas, he's like a yid, in certain halachas, we get him like a nachi. That's number one. So he knew before. Number two is the guy who took the video knew before too. So there's no 3 o'clock.
Why did New York say that 3 o'clock?
Because at 3 o'clock, because the Rabbanim decided by 3 o'clock that there's something wrong.
But in New York,
No, I don't know how New York, I'm not talking New York, I'm talking over here. Okay. That's number one. Number two, let's take a different nikuda. What will happen if I go into a store, a butcher? I sat after this in Western Kosher seeing how things are moving. A guy needs a certain type of cut, and it's not on the shelf. So what does the guy do? He goes to the back, cuts it, and brings it. Yeah? What happens if a person needed a certain cut, and that cut was only the stuff what they brought in? Is there any taruvis? Is there any veriv? No. So Rabbi Van told me in my house, I asked him, it didn't make sense. He only said he brought in 6 cases. It doesn't make sense. The man is an $8 million business, so he's bringing in 6 cases of meat. And that you're saying those rave. How do you know those rave? Kosher. It doesn't make sense that he had rave kosher. Who's going to play around with 8 cases of meat when you're bringing in 100 cases? It doesn't make sense. Right? In the story of Muncie, the guy admitted that it was rave treif. And then you understand, there's a chimud mammon. In Long Beach, this guy was selling Zachary Farm chickens 30 years ago. Chimud mammon, and the halacha is, if someone has a chimud mammon, he's not allowed to be by meat. So they told me that since they didn't let him bring in a certain type of meat, and he needed for Yontiv a certain type of meat, so therefore he took this meat and brought it in. That's what the guy tells me. So I look at him. In Cain, there's no roiv. Why? Because the guy knows which meat he's bringing in. It's not mixed with any other meat because he's bringing in only this cut because people want this cut. Could be ribstick, whatever it is. So therefore, where do you have your roiv? There's no mixture at all. The goy knows what he's cutting. The owner knows what he's cutting. Only the yid thinks it's glatt, and it's either Hebrew National, or it's North Star, or it's Nordstrom, right? Whatever it is, but he knows what he's cutting. The guy knows what he's cutting. There's no taruvis because you telling me that that type of meat was sold there. And that type of meat, there was no taruvis. So according to the RCC, to Rabbi Van, where's your head to avoid? There was no taruvis at all. The only problem is the Jew didn't know what he was buying.
Can I ask you, if it was Hebrew National, isn't that a suffix in itself?
Wait 1 second. We're not yet there. Those other Rabbanim came and they said their heter is only because of Roiv. Now, Hebrew National, the Shachtim, I spoke with Usher Zellengold. Usher Zellengold said like this, that Hebrew National is no good. And there was the guy who's a Ma'avamashevos, he was one time over there by Sheva Bachs, and he told all the Shachtim from Hebrew National to leave when Usher Zellingard is going to get up to speak. So Shechet said, I have nothing against you, but I have to leave because of my business. The Shachtim are good Shachtim. The Shaila is the Malicha, Hadocha, and Nikur. And there are many stories of, it's very problematic. So now you're going to say, Malicha and Hadacha is a Issa D'Rabbanan. You're going to go in a whole thing that Dam Shabishla is only D'Rabbanan. But it's not, I'll tell you what someone from the OU told me, that if they would find out someone would be with Hebrew National, the Mashkiach would have a problem because the blood will be on the floor. You understand? So it's a very small, very thin heter to say that because of Hebrew National, therefore we're going to be matter everything. And the problem over here is that his brother-in-law sold the stuff, right? He was buying from his brother-in-law, right? So how could you figure out what came in? You don't think he's a partner with his brother-in-law?
Complete trade.
Right? So from the right pocket went into the left pocket? So they said they checked all the books? People have two sets of books in this business. Especially 30 years ago he sold treif. So now, what's the only het that they had that they gave him a hechsher now? Was that you have a mashgiach tmidi. Okay. So mitzat mashgiach tmidi, he's allowed to sell because the mashgiach tmidi is taking the place of that person. Now we have another din in Shulchan Aruch. I spoke with a Rav. I sent him this whole shaila. He says he has a different problem with it. In Kuf Yud Tes, there's a whole simon in Shulchan Aruch. HaChoshed l'dvar isa ein lismuch alav b'dvarim hanacholim. So Gemara in Avodah Zarah and in Mamidim, that if someone is choshed, you cannot rely on him on anything which is going to be Issa Shel Torah, and you have to have two simonim. Issa D'Rabbanan have one simonim, and it's Omar Rav Chovius, Chalav, Basa, Yayin, Chelis. Another one say Dugim, and they want to explain the difference between why Chalav and not. It's the Nikud is you don't believe a guy, trust him only if you have two simonim. And the Rashba wants to say in the if you have Rabbeinu Tam over there that he says that one simon could work, and he says if you send it to someone else, then one simon is good. You need two simonim. If you gave it to him to guard, then you need one simon because you'll see if it was tapped or not. Azay halter Rabbeinu Tam. But many argue, even for ourselves, if something is there, you have to have two simonim. And the shaila is, if a deraisa, you need two simonim, a drabanan, one simon is good enough. Yayin nesach stam yenam is a drabanan, so they're cheshit that they will pour, or something which is very expensive, even if it's a drabanan, we have to have two simonim because there's a chimut of mammon. So how are you allowed to buy from him meat? Because of the Mashiach Tmidi. If the Mashgiach Tmidi doesn't do his job, so who are you buying the meat from? From him. Are you allowed to? So then, if we go with that svara, 3 o'clock, Kuf Yud, Taruvis, not Taruvis, the whole thing falls off. Because you're buying from a choshed. And the Mashgiach is not doing his job. Mashgiach is not doing his job, so therefore you have to rely on him. Now that's a very big problem. What does this problem of Kuf Yud Tes open up? All the restaurants in Los Angeles. Question, are you allowed to go to someone who's not from in a milchadika restaurant, not meat? Chalav is one of the things.
What things?
Milk, like you have to be careful where you buy. So the only reason why you can go into him, if he has a mashgiach tmidi. Do they have a mashgiach tmidi? I don't think so. And does the mashgiach have the keys only? Does he open up the fires? You open up a large Pandora's box. So now, 12 o'clock, 11 o'clock, I want to go to Ralph's and my wife is hungry. And I have a kosher place over there. So the question is, Ralph's is a treifa place. So where are you going to falozich on who? On mashgiach. So does the mashgiach have, what type of level is the ashkacha? Rabbi Jeravel wasn't happy when he came. That's at least what I could say. And the answer was, it was only a temporary mashgiach. That's what was told to me. So, a temporary mashgiach also has to know the halacha. So, we verlassen sich an der Rava Machsher, was verlässt sich auf den Mashgiach, wo der Mashgiach lav davke knows from A to Z. Or they asked the Mashkiach, is the tuna over here Bishul Yisrael? He said, no, we don't have to have Bishul Yisrael. So the fellow said, but I see cans of Dugim over there. So he says, so it says Dugim, I didn't see Bishul Yisrael on it. Or the guy was asked on the pans in a store that they bake fleshik and they make parv. So he asked, how do you know the difference between the fleshik pans or the parva pans? So he said to the Rav, because the parva pans is on by the parva oven, and the fleshik pans are by the fleshik oven. And the Rav looked at him, said, thank you. The answer was that the fleshik pans have 2 holes, and the parva pans have 1 hole. But the Mashgiach didn't know that. Okay. So therefore, if someone asks me today, where could I eat? At home, right, and hope it's well. So now the question over here is, if the fellas are from Yid and not standing by the cash register, and not sitting upstairs in his office, but he is involved, and there's a mashgiach coming to check up, damals I could say, okay, the person is involved, a from Yid, he understands, and he's in the kitchen, and he's getting involved in things, so he's on top of things. So the mashgiach is there to make sure that they're on top of things. But if the guy is by the cash register, he's in his office taking whatever, making parties or whatever, in the bills and so forth. So for them, verlässt sich auf den Mashgiach, and if the Mashgiach doesn't have to come in so often because it's a firma Yid, an owner, so wenn verlässt man sich auf den Goyvas Koch. Or if the Mashgiach doesn't know from one place to the other. This is the problem we have now in Los Angeles.
Not just in Los Angeles.
All over. I spoke to my son, a terrible story in Florida. A Mashgiach came to a Milchadika restaurant, not called, that he made a spot check. The cook bashed him up and he's in the hospital. Because he came not expected. In Boca Raton. So, to be able to eat in a restaurant is you have to have a fumiyid, was the deitzach, the mashgiach was deitzach, and people can come in any time to check. And in every place has to be a protocol exactly what the person, the mashgiach, has to do. And if it's not a written protocol in every place, so you get a mashgiach, a temporary, the guy doesn't know exactly what to do. How to check the vegetables, how to check this, to make sure this and make sure that. And there's no protocol. There's no protocol. I mean, because I spoke with people and they asked, that means you were sleeping by the wheel for all these years, and that's where we are now. Now the question is, what's the other question? I don't know. It was Ralph's, Molchike, 3 o'clock. We explained 3 o'clock, and we explained Hebrew National.
How about other stores that bought from you?
Other stores, now the problem over here is other stores were bought meat, is that everyone is saying they only bought closed boxes. Now he was a very big supplier. We cannot take that away from him. He was a very big supplier, and he bought from a lot of places. In a lot of places people bought closed boxes. Now if you bought a sealed box, and it came from the manufacturer sealed, so we don't have no problem. The problem is if you bought open stuff. And the problem is that restaurants cannot buy only closed stuff. They have to have things prepared. Steaks prepared, this prepared, that prepared.
Made labels for the boxes.
Not quite. they've never found that on any boxes. I mean, they found the stuff what he could have made.
So does the restaurant need kosher or should they?
Huh? This is a very hard shaila, and I cannot paskin. I asked a few rabbanim, and it's not so easy to just come along and say to kasher. We kasher this week our kitchen because we don't because just l'chumrah, and I have many people coming around to come along and say that you say maybe it's no good, maybe we have to kasher. Well, we kasher the paper plates and we live in Kal. We kashered the warmers. We're getting new crock pot, there's the stuff, new ones, and the other stuff, and the sinks and everything, all the metal stuff was kasher with fire this week. Just
There was
l'chumrah.
another question, he picked up boxes.
So what do you want I should do? You picked up.
And then he kept that out like whatever he wanted.
Oh, thank you. That's what we're talking. No.
According
Now-
to what you said, how can you eat from MGM catering upstairs here? He doesn't-
I am not giving a hechsher on anyone.
Stop. You didn't understand to me.
But he has two Yidden. But he has two Yidden working
Oh, he has to
downstairs,
read, okay.
or three from a Yidden working
So we're relying on
downstairs.
those people that are working on.
They have eyes. Yeah, they have eyes. It's better than a mashgiach coming in. You know, there was a convention in an organization of Kashrus lately, and they asked about this guy concept of a mashgiach. So he said, I went to Borough Park. I went into a store, a deli, and I bought something. And I asked them, when does the mashgiach come? So they say the mashgiach comes once a week to eat lunch here.
Always the same guy.
I have no idea. Another place he eats breakfast, another place he eats supper. Finished.
Breakfast, lunch, and dinner.
Now, the problem is with mashgiach Tamidi, if you have someone with chimut mammon, that you know that 30 years ago you mamish sell treif, then you cannot have one mashgiach Tamidi. It's impossible. You have to have alternates. That give time that the guy should take a break. And there's no mirsis over here. You called him once, you'll call him again, and that shows. That's the worst.
Well, the third time.
Now, we sent out an email last week that many times they tell the mashgiach we have to go upstairs or downstairs to check vegetables. And when the guy goes upstairs to check vegetables, then he brings the stuff in. Right? And it happened. And that's what we're dealing with. And this wasn't in Los Angeles, but it was a different kashrus organization, and everyone likes to pack the other fella in. And this is the problem we have, that you want a higher standard of hashgacha, but with that, the mashgichim have to be trained and trained and trained. And every place has to have its protocol, because when you give kashrus on a fleishike restaurant is one way. If there's wine, there's something else. In a milchike restaurant, there's something else. In a store which sells sandwiches, a deli is. Every place has its unique thing, and every place has to be written up according to their place, and the mashgiach has to review it. And it's not here. Now,
Since it's such a sensitive issue that the guy that has such a pass cannot qualify no matter what.
yeah, the question, how did they give him a hechsher?
Yeah, it's crazy.
That's the problem. And the halach is, if there's chimuk mammon, you cannot give. That's a question which was never answered.
Yeah.
One answer that we got, we never knew that he had I had an email. We never knew that in Long Beach he ever had before 30 years a place. I had it black and white.
So according to this,
Everybody
Coffee
knew.
Bean is out.
Well, you can figure it out. I don't have to say who's what. The problem is,
No, from a person Goyim worked in.
Oh, Goyim. Cafe Elite is also Goyim.
there's it's a problem. It's a problem. It's a problem.
It's your show. Come on.
One second.
What?
No, we don't have the video.
Hello? It's a problem. I'm not giving Echshem here. The problem over here is also, problem over here is, going back to what I said before, and I said it to the Bachim, that even if I have a from a Yid with a good mashkiach, I need to know the policies of the hashkacha. You know, there's certain hashkachas, but the main thing by them is yashon. Chol of Yisrael, nicht. Pas Yisrael, efshe, yeah. Bishul Yisrael on tuna, don't need. So therefore, if the Rava Machshe personally is not machmer, and the Rava Machshe will feel that if there's missing Chol of Yisrael, he personally will go to Rouse 11 o'clock at night and buy Chol of Stam or whatever what they call. If so, then why should the manager in a store who he says Chol of Yisrael, if he's missing Chol of Yisrael and it didn't come or something got spoiled, not to send someone to Rouse and buy a bottle of Al Tadina milk? What stops him? And if he's not from, the morsel. We have to wake up that we're living now in a time where we want everything comfortable and everything should be tachas hashkuchus and this and that. It doesn't work that way because you have to train people. People have to know what they're doing. And the biggest problem is they don't get people with the right, because it's not worth it for them. You pay $8 a mashkiach an hour. Well, what he's gonna? He'll work 10 hours, he'll get $80.
But he had free lunch.
But he had free lunch and coffee.
Maybe.
Let's go. All right. So therefore, the ashkachas have to start paying better. Then what you get, what you pay for. The Debertzina, I don't know the mashkichim. The Debertzina Rav did not let the goy, when he gave ashkachas, do anything. The mashkiach had to be there for A to Z. So they asked him why. There's many things. He's not cooking and so forth. So he said, "Ich darf nicht haben, the goy soll sein mir mein Rava Machshe." That the goy is going to what? Say, this I'm allowed to do, this I'm not allowed to do. I need a Rava Machshe and I need a mashkiach to say what I'm allowed to do or not. Fernando in the yeshiva, one time. Oh, no. It was Pesach, and he lived over there. So he went and he opened up the Muchike kitchen, and he wrapped something with three times, and he cooked it. And they were going bananas. So he turned around, he said, "What? It was wrapped 3 times. You guys hold that something has double wrapped is okay. So it was 3 times wrapped, for surely is okay." Now, Fernando maybe knew more than other mashkichim know. But nevertheless, okay, any questions?
What about mashkiach being paid by the hashkacha versus by the rest?
Well, this is a problem. What it has to really be changed, that the mashkichim have to be paid by the organization, not by the restaurant. Huh? No, you don't.
It has to be the policy of the hashkacha.
It has to be the policy of the hashkacha.
You need to know the policy of the hashkacha.
I don't know what the policies there are. I just want to say one thing, and I said it to Rabbi Langer today, this afternoon. Since Yontif, I was with Rabbi Langer on the phone very often, that we should get an inspection from Shai Torah. He doesn't belong not to Kehillah, not to the RCC. The OU came, finally, Rabbi Luban came and checked different restaurants. He was here for 2 days. He wrote up a report. The report is in California, in Los Angeles, but it's not being revealed. The OU promised Rabbi Langer that he will see it, and in the last 24 hours he did not see it.
I think there's 18 minutes got erased over there.
Okay. So now, I was with Rabbi Langer. I spoke with him, and he's asking that he has to see the report. And it's the only, he got the money, paid the OU to come. The OU promised that he will get an outside report. He's not here, he's not going to share the report to the whole public. It's not for public knowledge. But there has to be some rabbinical committee with Balbatim making sure that all the recommendations of the OU are fulfilled, and then there has to be another visit to make sure that everything is in place. Till that happens, we cannot rely on that hechsher. And as we said, Achen Shel Pesach, Bechlal, you only can rely that there's a Fuma Yid who is there, and there's a good mashkiach on top of him. That's, we said that Achen Shel Pesach, and that stands. So if someone is going to ask me, what about this place, that place, I'm not giving hashkachas. Now we have to remember there's one thing also, what we didn't mention before. Fires do go out under a stove or in an oven. It doesn't burn constantly. There's not no eish tamid tukat. Right? There is no there's a constant fire burning. So in many of these restaurants, it's very possible that the fire goes out. If there's a Fuma Yid over there, and the guy has a sign, and he's told, you're not allowed to touch the fire. So the guy tells a mashkiach, mashkiach will go and open. If you go to a place where you can't find a mashkiach, or the owner is upstairs or somewhere in an office, now if the fire goes out, who's going to open up the fire? He's going to run around to look for the Yid. So it could be Bishalakum. With hashgacha.
I could testify to that. I
Huh?
fixed ovens in restaurants, and the boy jumped to light the fire. And the owner was in the kitchen in the back.
You go to a simcha, and they have these small burners. We were by a simcha, a small burner, and the guy opened it. I jumped, and we got someone else to light it because the guy lit it. Where's the mashkiach? The mashkiach was running here. The mashkiach is running there. The mashkiach is running there.
The warmer it was.
It wasn't a warmer. He's making omelets.
If it was a warmer,
It's a butane stove.
warmer is another.
It's a small stove, and the guy is cooking omelets for the bris, which is in the morning.
The OU's guy was making only looked at our 6 restaurants or every restaurant in the area.
The Vila, not every restaurant.
The new oversight.
Everyone should know Yaska has a sale for cookbook. If you just move, send my phone number, go and buy your cookbook. That's the answer.
The OU checked not all the restaurants. They only checked like 25 restaurants. And I asked Rabbi Luban, how is it possible that in 1.5 days you checked so many places? And he answered that if you see the same problem all over, so you don't need too long to go in and you look at the restaurant, you see the problem, and you don't have to sit there for 2 hours because they're all going through the same similar problem. Now, Rabbi Jervel has to have a refuah shlema. Maybe we should give him a refuah shlema. He had to come to check the caterers, and he can't come because Pashat B'Gashmis is sick. And and Rabbi Jervel is someone who doesn't miss words when he is unhappy, and he does it with the OU as he would do it with anyone else.
Should the oversight be on all of Shadem?
The oversight should be on all hechsherim, and Rabbi Langer is trying to push Kehillah also to go through it, and it's not so easy. And Be'etzem, in a meeting, I said that there has to be. I don't say it has to be now, but you have to do it.
So it's
And I was
the
voted
intention
down.
of the RCC to have an oversight.
What?
They're trying to do the right thing, having an oversight.
They're trying to do, but
It's a good thing that they're trying to
wait
do the
one
right thing.
second. Rabbi Eisens came 5 years ago, and I asked someone, do you have a report of what Rabbi Eisens wrote 5 years ago to be able to match his report with the report of the OU? And the answer was there's no report. I said, how could that be? How could that be? You went to a place, I mean, you checked it. So I was told Rabbi Eisens came, and he said, for outside town hashgacha, we're okay. What does that mean? From the west of the Mississippi, the Shulchan Aruch changes from the east of the Mississippi. Now, I don't know why there wasn't. I don't know why. Now, I'm telling you, I didn't speak to Eisens. I don't know why there wasn't a report. But there's nothing to match it to. So if they come and tell you Rabbi Eisens gave a report and he checked that we're good, but there's no report. So now, Rabbi, he went to Ralph's and he had a lot. His heart palpitation and his blood pressure went up that they had to take him out right away. And that's under the OU with the RCC, and the mashgiach was removed. Anyways, but.
Rabbi, as long as we're in Golas, we're into Vegas. Into Vegas.
Into Vegas, okay. Now, the thing is, I'm not saying that Los Angeles is worse than New York is worse than Los Angeles. I'm only saying that we have to remember we are what we eat. And after 120 years, when Mashiach comes, you can say, don't blame me, blame the RCC or Kehillah, but Lepoil, if you learn Perek Zayin of Tanya, when we eat something wrong, we contaminate ourselves. Perek Zayin Ches. All right? So therefore, we have to be careful. And that's all I can say now. And we have, we're just waiting that the RCC should release the report, not to everyone, but to Rabbi Langer, that the outside committee should see it, and then things could start moving in the right way. Good to know.
Summary, what are the guidelines, except for the Fruma Mashgiach and the Fruma owner?
You have to have a Mashgiach who knows what he's doing. Now, Fruma is not enough. You have to have a Mashgiach knowing what he's doing.